The diligence rolls into Caldwell Crossing just past noon, trailing a long ribbon of dust that settles slow over the main street, like something that has no intention of leaving. The sun sits high and merciless over the Texas flatlands, bleaching the wood of the storefronts pale and drawing sweat from every man standing idle on the boardwalk. It is the kind of heat that makes people mean without trying. The town is small enough that a stranger arriving by coach is still an event. Men pause outside the feed store. A woman at the dry goods window tilts her head without turning her body. Two ranch hands leaning against the post outside the saloon exchange a glance that doesn't need words. Caldwell Crossing has learned to read arrivals the way farmers read weather, with suspicion and something close to appetite. The coach door opens. She comes down the iron step without help, one hand holding the door frame, the other gripping a worn leather bag that has seen too many miles to look dignified. Her dress is grey cotton, washed thin at the elbows, and her dark hair is pulled back in a low braid that the long journey has not managed to fully undo. She is 24 years old, and she carries herself with the particular straightness of a woman who has decided that posture is the one thing no one can take from her. Her eyes, green shading into grey, the colour of river water before a storm, move across the street in a single sweep. She takes in every face. She takes in the way the looking happens, the particular quality of it, the kind that sizes and sorts and decides before a word is spoken. She has been looked at that way before. She knows what it means. Sheriff Walt Pruitt stands at the edge of the boardwalk with his thumbs in his belt and an expression that mistakes itself for authority. "Well," he says, loud enough for the street to hear, "Hurst finally got himself a bride. Bought her clean out of Missouri, I hear. Man acquires a woman the same way he acquires livestock." A few men laugh. One woman looks away. Nobody contradicts him. Nora Ellis does not flinch. She does not redden. She turns her gaze to Pruitt with the calm, unhurried attention of someone committing a face to memory, and then she looks away from him as though he is a fence post she has already passed. That somehow is worse for him than a reaction would have been. She stands on the packed dirt of Caldwell Crossing's main street, with her bag at her feet and the sun beating down on her shoulders, and she waits. She was told a man would meet her. She was told his name. She was told almost nothing else. She had not asked for more. There was no point in asking for more. No creditor she had ever known settled a debt without sending proof. The absence of it had bothered her, though she had not yet decided what to make of it. 3 weeks ago, in a rented room above a dry goods store in Harlow, Missouri, a man named Odell Prentice had sat across from her father at a kitchen table that still smelled of the breakfast neither of them had touched. Her father's hands had been shaking, not from age, not from cold, from the particular tremor of a man who has run out of road and knows it. The debt he carried had a name on it, and that name had a date attached, and that date was coming the way winter comes, without sympathy. Prentice had laid out the arrangement in plain sentences. A rancher in Texas, a man of solid means, he said, in need of a capable woman for the household. The terms were practical: a roof, food, the legal protection of a married name. Her father's debt cleared in full upon her agreement and departure. Nora had sat very still through all of it. She had asked one question. "What is his name?" "Hurst," Prentice said. "Caleb Hurst, out of Caldwell Crossing." She did not know the name. She had no reason to know it. She looked at her father, at the tremor in his hands, at the thing in his eyes that was not quite shame, but was too close to it for comfort, and she understood that the asking was already over. The deciding had been done without her. Samuel would be at the mill by now, she thought, already carrying more than he should at his age. She told herself, on the 3-day ride south and then west, that she would stay long enough to confirm the debt was cleared. She had set herself a deadline the way a woman sets a trap, carefully, quietly, without announcing it to anyone. Once the debt was settled and documented, she would assess her position. She was not a woman who confused an arrangement with a sentence. She is still running the arithmetic of that plan when she hears boots on the dry earth behind her. Caleb Hurst does not announce himself. He simply arrives the way a shadow arrives, without ceremony, without warning, already present before you think to look. He is tall in the way that comes from actual height rather than posture, broad at the shoulder, wearing a plain work shirt and dark trousers that have been mended at the knee with careful stitching. His face is angular and weathered, jaw set with the particular stillness of a man who has learned that silence costs nothing, and talk often costs too much. His hair is dark, with the first grey beginning at the temples, and his eyes, when they find her, are a quiet and steady brown that give away absolutely nothing. He looks at her for a moment that runs a beat too long for pure assessment. She looks back at him with the same measuring attention she gave the rest of the street, and that is when she notices it, the belt buckle. Silver, catching the noon light with the easy confidence of quality metal. Engraved. She is close enough to read the initials, CH, set inside a small branded mark she doesn't recognize, the kind of detail that comes from a craftsman's hand rather than a general store shelf. It sits at odds with everything else about him. The worn shirt, the mended knee, the plain hat with its sweat-stained band. She files it away without knowing why. "Miss Ellis," he says. Not a question, not a greeting exactly, just an identification. "Mr. Hurst," she replies. He picks up her bag. He does not ask. He turns toward a wagon at the hitching post without waiting to see if she follows. The way a man moves when he has already decided the next 10 steps and is waiting on the world to catch up. She follows. Not because he assumed she would, because she has a destination, and he is currently the only road to it. The wagon stops at the post office before leaving town. A clerk brings out a wrapped parcel and a bundle of envelopes. Caleb takes them, sets them in the wagon bed, and pays the clerk with bills drawn from his coat pocket, counted without looking, handed over without discussion of change. The clerk doesn't ask about the change. He just nods and steps back. Nora watches this. She watches the way the clerk's posture shifts in Caleb's presence. Not fearful, not servile, but adjusted. The way people adjust around someone they have quietly decided is not to be tested. On the road out of town, a man called Harlan Cross, one of Cale's men, though Nora doesn't know that yet, calls out from the feed store steps. "Hurst, Cale says he's still waiting on your answer about the East parcel." Caleb doesn't look at him. "Tell him the answer hasn't changed," he says, and keeps driving. Nora files that away too. The road to the ranch runs 14 miles through country that does not apologize for itself. The land is flat and dry and vast, interrupted by mesquite scrub and the occasional dried creek bed, cutting pale scars across the earth. The sky above it is enormous, a hard and cloudless blue that makes everything beneath it feel exposed. In the distance, a low line of hills sits hazy at the horizon, like a thought that never quite formed. Caleb does not speak. She does not feel the need to fill the silence. They ride in the particular quiet of two people who have not yet decided what they are to each other. The ranch arrives as a collection of shapes before it becomes a place. The long line of a fence, the dark bulk of a barn, a roof edge above a low rise. Then the house itself comes into view, and Nora takes it in without expression. It is modest and unfinished, the front addition still framed in raw timber with no siding yet applied, a gap in the porch railing that has been propped with a board. But the foundation is solid stone. The barn is large and well maintained, the fence line straight and tight. The land around it has been cleared and worked, and even in the dry heat of August, there is evidence that someone knows what they are doing out here. This is not a failing place. It is an unfinished one. There is a difference. She carries her own bag inside. Caleb shows her the back room without ceremony. A cot, a quilt, a window facing the yard, a single nail on the wall for hanging. Clean, functional, ready in the way that things are ready when someone has thought about it beforehand. They ride back to town that afternoon for the courthouse formality. The justice of the peace is a bored man named Aldred, who speaks the necessary words with the enthusiasm of a man reading livestock invoices. Caleb signs. Nora signs. Aldred stamps the paper. No flowers, no witness beyond the court clerk, no moment where either of them is invited to pretend this is something it currently is not. On the ride home, the sun is lower and the heat has taken on a different quality, heavier amber-tinted, the way it gets in late afternoon when the land begins to exhale the warmth it has been holding all day. Nora watches the horizon and lets the arithmetic run again. The debt, the documentation, the departure she has already begun planning. What she does not plan for is the bookshelf she notices when she finally unpacks her bag that evening. Narrow, set beside the back room window, where the last of the day's light falls cleanest, built to exactly the right height for a seated person to reach without effort. It holds nothing currently, but it is clearly built for holding something specific. The spacing of the notched edges, the smooth sanding of the wood, the precise positioning relative to the window. She turns it over in her mind and sets it aside. The empty shelf by the window does not remain empty forever, though she does not remark on when that changes. Men who live alone build shelves. It means nothing. She sits on the edge of the cot in the last of the daylight and writes the first letter she has written since leaving Missouri. It is addressed to her father. It is not a long letter. It is not a warm one. It asks one question, direct and without softening. How much of the debt remains and in whose name is it held? She seals the envelope and sets it on the windowsill. Outside, the Texas dark comes in fast and complete the way it only does in open country, swallowing the hills and the fence lines and the vast indifferent sky. The ranch goes quiet around her. Somewhere in the barn, a horse shifts in its stall. Nora Ellis lies back on the cot with her eyes open and thinks about a man who pays in clean bills without counting change, who wears a silver buckle worth more than his shirt, whose name makes clerks adjust their posture, and whose answer to a land offer hasn't changed, apparently ever. She thinks about the shelf by the window. She does not sleep for a long time. The first week at the ranch passes the way unfamiliar things pass, slowly, and with a particular kind of attention that exhausts without producing anything visible. Nora learns the place the way she has always learned things, by watching before touching, by understanding a system before attempting to improve it. She wakes before Caleb each morning, which takes effort because he wakes early, and she maps the ranch in the grey pre-dawn quiet, the water pump that needs 2 full strokes before pressure builds, the cellar door that drags at the left hinge, the corner of the east fence where the posts lean 2 degrees off true. She says nothing about any of it. She is building a picture before she builds anything else. Caleb operates in the same silence, moving through his mornings with the focused economy of a man who has lived alone long enough that every action has been stripped of anything unnecessary. He eats without conversation. He works without announcing what he is doing or why. The first morning, he sets a tin cup of coffee on the kitchen table and leaves through the back door before she reaches the bottom of the stairs. The cup is exactly where she would have placed it herself. She drinks the coffee and does not remark on it. By the second week of August, the tension in the air has nothing to do with the two of them and everything to do with the sky. The heat has gone from brutal to something beyond description, a dry, grinding press that pulls moisture from the soil and turns the creek bed shallow and pale. The mesquite scrub along the south fence has gone grey-green and brittle. Caleb comes in one evening and stands at the door looking north for a long time before he speaks. If we don't get the south field cut in the next 4 days, we lose it. He is not speaking to her, exactly. He is speaking the way a man speaks when he has run the numbers and does not like the answer. He has 2 ranch hands, both borrowed from a neighbor who will want them back by Friday. The field is 40 acres of winter wheat that went in early and is now, against all probability, ready. Nora looks up from the supply invoices she has been organizing, a stack of papers she found on the kitchen shelf, unopened and undated, which offended her practical instincts on sight. "I can run a scythe," she says. He looks at her, not with doubt exactly, with the particular attention of a man recalibrating. "Missouri farm," she adds, which is all the explanation she offers. He nods once and goes to wash up for supper. That is the whole conversation. The next morning she is in the south field at first light, with a scythe in her hands and the sun coming in flat and orange across the wheat, and they work, the 4 of them, Caleb and Nora and the 2 hands, in the particular focused silence of people with a shared deadline and no time for anything else. She is not as fast as the men. She is faster than she should be, and Caleb notices. She can feel it in the way his attention moves across the field, the way it pauses on her, and then moves on without comment. He does not offer help she hasn't asked for. He does not slow his own pace to make her feel better about hers. Both of these things, she finds, are forms of respect she has not been shown often. They finish in 3 days. The evening after the last row is cut, she goes to the canal, a rudimentary irrigation channel that runs along the eastern edge of the cultivated ground, feeding from the river branch a quarter-mile north. She has been thinking about it since the first day she walked the fields. The channel is shallow and poorly graded, losing water to seepage along its length before it reaches the far end of the property. In a dry year, this means the eastern plots don't drink until everything else already has, which is another way of saying they don't drink enough. She does not ask permission. She picks up a spade from the tool shed and begins regrading the channel wall along its most severe loss point, deepening the bed by 4 inches and shoring the near bank with flat stones from the dry creek. It takes 2 evenings. When she is finished, the water runs to the far end of the east plot in full instead of arriving there spent and thin. Caleb says nothing, but 2 days later, she finds a new lantern hanging from a nail outside her bedroom door. The old one was functional. This one is better. No note, no explanation. Just the lantern catching the morning light. She hangs it inside and says nothing in return. They are developing a language that does not use words, and she is beginning to understand its grammar. It is on a Thursday morning, 10 days after the harvest, that she first notices the water level dropping. The canal is running lower than it should be, not dramatically, not all at once, but consistently, a finger's width less each morning than the evening before. She walks the channel north, following it toward the feed point at the river branch, and finds what she is looking for 300 yards up. The water has been diverted. A rough earthen dam, hastily constructed, pushes the river branch east along a shallow dug trench that runs toward the neighboring property. It has been built within the last week. It is not an accident of erosion or a natural shift of the bank. Someone put it there with a shovel and intention. She stands at the diversion and reads it the way her father taught her to read land, as information, not injury. She knows whose property lies east of that trench. Tom Briggs. A man she has seen once, briefly, at the edge of the road when she and Caleb drove past his fence line on the way to town. He had not waved. She goes back to the ranch, changes her boots, takes the bay mare from the stable, and rides to the Briggs property without telling Caleb where she is going. Briggs is at his front fence when she arrives, doing the particular kind of maintenance work that men do when they want to look busy without actually being busy. He is a soft-faced man with the look of someone who has spent years being agreeable to people he can't afford to refuse, and when he sees Nora riding toward him alone, something in his expression shifts, relief and wariness arriving at the same moment. She stops the mare at the fence and does not dismount. "Mr. Briggs," she says, "there's a diversion dam on the river branch north of the Hurst property line. It went in sometime this week." He looks at his fence post. "River shift sometimes," he says. "Nothing I can speak to." "It was built," she says, "with a spade. I can see the cut edge on the eastern bank." She gives him a moment with that. The Texas water rights statutes of 1866 are clear on diversion above a downstream claim. What I'm describing is a violation of those statutes, which means it's a matter for the county clerk. She keeps her voice even, the way her father kept his voice even when he was not bluffing. "I'd rather it didn't become that. The dam comes down and the bank is restored before Saturday, and it doesn't become that." Briggs looks up at her. He is searching for something in her face. Hesitation, inexperience, the softness of a woman who has made a threat she doesn't intend to follow through. He does not find it. "Saturday," he says. "Friday would be better," she replies, and turns the mare back toward the road. She does not look back. If she had, she might have seen at the edge of the scrub line 40 yards east, a still figure on a dark horse watching from the shadows of the mesquite. Caleb Hurst, who followed at a distance she never closed. He kept to the scrub line and downwind, far enough back that the dry air carried her voice without carrying the sound of his horse. Who heard every word through the dry air without moving closer. Who turns his horse back toward the ranch now, with something in his jaw that was not there this morning. He does not tell her he was there. She does not ask where he went that afternoon. The dam comes down by Thursday evening. She checks Friday morning. The water runs full. That same week she writes to her father. Not the warm letter she might once have written, before the kitchen table in Harlow and the man with the trembling hands. A practical letter. She asks directly, how much remains of the debt, and to whom is it owed? She needs the name. She needs the number. She has given herself a deadline and she intends to honor it, which means she needs the information her father denied her when there was still time to negotiate. She seals the envelope and gives it to the post-rider on his Friday round. She does not expect a fast answer. She expects an honest one. Whether those two things are compatible with her father, she is no longer certain. The evening she sends the letter, she is sitting at the kitchen table when she reaches for the Bible on the shelf to check the date on a supply invoice tucked between its pages. The book falls open in her hand, and something slips from between the front cover and the first page, drifting to the table. It is a piece of paper, folded twice. Old and the fold lines have gone soft with handling. She almost sets it aside unopened. But the paper has been folded and unfolded many times. She can see it in the way it wants to open along its own creases, and something about it holds her. She unfolds it. It is a drawing. Pencil. Careful but unpracticed. The hand of a man who learned to draw by necessity rather than instruction. A farmhouse. Or what remains of one. The shape of walls with the roof collapsed inward, the lines of the structure interrupted and falling. Beside it, the suggestion of trees, and in the foreground a smudged and imprecise rendering of figures. People moving away from the structure, moving toward the edge of the paper. It is a farmhouse on fire, or after fire. The lines don't show flame, but they show destruction, the kind of deliberate devastation that only two things produce: time or intention. She sits with it for a moment. Then she hears boots on the stairs and folds it quickly and opens the Bible to a random page and sets it in her lap as Caleb comes through the kitchen. He goes to the stove, pours water. She watches him from the corner of her eye. His face is the same as it always is, still private, giving nothing away. She sets the Bible back on the shelf when he leaves the room. She tucks the drawing back where she found it, between the cover and the first page, aligned with the original fold. She goes to bed that night with the image of that falling farmhouse behind her eyes, and the question it carries, and no way to ask it that wouldn't require explaining how she found it. Outside, the August dark settles over the Texas flatlands like a held breath. The canal runs full to the eastern plot for the first time since she arrived. The wheat is in. The water is back. And Nora Ellis, who came here with a deadline and a plan, lies on her cot and realizes that the plan already has a crack in it, and that she cannot identify precisely when the crack appeared. The change in Caldwell Crossing happens the way most damage happens, quietly, and from a direction she isn't watching. October comes in with a shift in the air that is almost a relief after the long brutality of summer. The heat backs off by degrees, the mornings turning cool enough that breath shows faint and brief before the sun clears the eastern hills. The land takes on a different quality in the lower light, less hostile, almost patient, as though it has been waiting all along for the season to turn and reveal what was underneath the dust. Nora has found a rhythm at the ranch. Not comfort, exactly. She is too careful a woman to confuse rhythm with safety, but a functional steadiness that she has built the way she builds most things, one deliberate piece at a time. The household runs clean and ordered. The canal holds. The supply invoices are current and filed. She has begun a kitchen garden along the south wall of the house, modest in scope, practical in intention. Caleb has not commented on it. She found the soil turned and loosened one morning before she went out to work it, and she did not ask who had done it. This is the grammar of the ranch. Action without announcement, attention without declaration. She is beginning to read it fluently, which is precisely when Caldwell Crossing decides to read her differently. It starts small, the way infections start. A woman at the dry goods counter who was warm in September is careful in October, present, but arranged into a particular kind of politeness that keeps its distance. Two women outside the post office who stop talking when Nora approaches. The mercantile owner, a man named Draper who had always been straightforward in his transactions, who finds reasons to make her wait while other customers are served first. She does not misread these signs. She has been read wrong by towns before, and she knows the texture of it, the way social temperature drops before anyone will admit there is a draft. She says nothing to Caleb. She listens instead, which has always served her better than asking. By the second week of October, She has assembled enough fragments to understand the shape of what is moving through the town. A rumor, specifically, that her marriage to Caleb Hurst may not be valid because she arrived already promised to another man in Missouri. A prior commitment, the story goes, that she concealed from the arrangement, which would make the Caldwell Crossing paperwork not a marriage but a fraudulent contract. It is a precise and well-constructed lie. It targets the one thing she cannot defend without documentation she doesn't have here, her own history. And it travels through the town in the particular way that rumors travel when someone is feeding them deliberately, not as accusation, but as concern, as worry, as the reluctant sharing of information too important to keep private. She does not know yet who is at the source, but she knows the shape of a coordinated whisper when she hears one. She goes about her business in Caldwell Crossing, with her posture straight and her face arranged into the same steady expression she wore when she stepped off the diligence 2 months ago. She does not confront. She does not explain herself to women who haven't asked a direct question. She waits and she watches, and she files every detail. It is in this state of careful attention that she comes home one afternoon and finds herself in a confrontation she had not anticipated. Not with the town, but with Caleb. She has been aware of the correspondence for several weeks. Letters arriving from Austin, bearing the seal of a law office, Merritt and Cole, attorneys at law, the return address consistent across every envelope. Caleb takes them from the post-rider before she can see them clearly, carries them to his study, and locks them in a flat cedar box on the shelf above his desk. She has seen the box. She has not touched it, but she has counted the letters, 4 since August, the most recent arriving 3 days ago, and she has held the question of them at arm's length for as long as patience allows. The specific trigger is not the letters themselves. It is the combination of the letters and the rumors and the drawing she found in the Bible and the silver buckle, and the way the post clerk adjusts his posture, assembled now into a shape she cannot ignore. She finds him in the barn that evening, working a harness that doesn't obviously need working. She closes the barn door behind her. "The letters from Austin," she says. "I want to know what they are." He keeps his hands on the harness. "Legal correspondence." "About what?" "Land matters." She waits. He does not add to it. "Caleb." She uses his name deliberately, and the first time she has used it in a sentence directed at him rather than around him. "There are rumors moving through this town about the validity of our marriage. I am trying to defend a position I was given without explanation. I cannot do that without information." He sets the harness down. He turns to look at her, and there is something in the steadiness of his expression that she has learned to read as the surface of something much less steady underneath. He is not unmoved. He is controlled. There is a difference. "It is not your concern," he says. "I signed that paper at the courthouse," she says. "That made it my concern." The silence between them stretches. Outside, the wind moves through the mesquite with a dry, papery sound, and somewhere along the south fence, a post shifts in the cooling ground. "It will be resolved," he says. She looks at him for a long moment. Then she turns and walks back to the house. She does not slam a door. She closes it with the flat, final sound of a woman who has decided something, which is quieter than anger and considerably more dangerous. The kitchen is dim in the early evening light. She sits at the table without lighting the lamp and works through what she knows with the methodical precision of someone who has always had to think her way to places other people were simply given. The letters are about land. "Legal correspondence," he said. "From a law office in Austin that sends 4 letters in 2 months, which is not the pace of routine business. It is the pace of something active, something time-sensitive, something requiring attention." She thinks about the mercantile owner who made her wait, about the rumor that is too well-shaped to be accidental, about the man on the road who called out about the East parcel and received a flat refusal, about the fact that Caleb Hurst, who appears to own a modest and unfinished ranch in a dry valley, pays in clean bills without discussion, and whose belt buckle belongs to a different category of man entirely. She pushes back from the table and takes her coat from the hook by the back door. The cellar supply run is a weekly task she has made her own. Caleb has no system for it, and the previous arrangement was simply forgetting things until they ran out, which offended her. She takes the lamp and goes down the narrow steps, and it is while she is shifting sacks to reach the back shelf that she sees the edge of it behind the larger crate of cornmeal. A rolled paper, tied with twine, tucked flat against the stone wall where it would not be visible without moving the crate. She moves the crate. She unrolls it on the floor of the cellar, holding it flat with the lamp set close. It is a cadastral map. Official survey issue, the kind produced by the Texas General Land Office, with the property boundaries rendered in careful ink lines and the cardinal markers set at precise intervals. She finds the Hurst property name in the lower right quadrant, and then she follows the boundary lines. She follows them for a long time. The land marked under the Hurst name does not correspond to the ranch she has been living on. It corresponds to the ranch plus a vastly larger holding running northeast along the river branch, encompassing the fertile bottomland she can see from the upper field on a clear morning, extending to a boundary marker nearly 4 miles distant. The total acreage is noted in the lower margin in the surveyor's hand, 4,200 acres. She sits back on her heels in the dim cellar and breathes for a moment. This is not a working rancher of modest means with an unfinished house and a practical arrangement. This is something else entirely. She does not yet know the full shape of it, but the outline is becoming clear in the way outlines become clear, when enough separate pieces finally arrange themselves correctly. The silver buckle, the clean bills, the way people adjust, the law office in Austin sending urgent correspondence. A man who owns 4,000 acres of Texas land, who lives like a man who owns 400. And someone, she is now nearly certain it is whoever is spreading the marriage rumors, who wants something from that land and has decided that the arrangement between her and Caleb is an obstacle to getting it. She rolls the map carefully and replaces it behind the cornmeal crate exactly as she found it. She goes back upstairs and lights the lamp and starts supper without speaking. She does not tell Caleb what she found. Not yet. She needs to understand more before she reveals what she knows, because information used too early is information wasted. Her father taught her that, at least, before the debt and the trembling hands made him into something she could no longer trust. The following morning she goes into Caldwell Crossing, alone on the bay mare, with the stated purpose of collecting a fabric order from the mercantile. In the course of 3 ordinary stops, the mercantile, the post office, the small provision store at the north end of the main street, she hears the rumor about herself for the first time in its direct form, delivered with transparent false sympathy by a woman named Martha Greer, who has been the closest thing to friendly that Caldwell Crossing has offered since Nora arrived. Martha leans across the dry goods counter and says, in the confidential tone of a woman performing concern, "I only mention it because people are talking, and I thought you ought to know." Nora listens to the full shape of it. She asks one clarifying question. "Where did you hear this?" Martha's eyes move sideways for just a fraction of a second before she says, "Oh, it's just been going around." Nora thanks her. She says she appreciates being told. She picks up her fabric and her provisions and rides home with the sideways shift of Martha's eyes, stored carefully in the place where she keeps information she is not done with yet. At the provision store before leaving, the owner mentions without apparent significance that the new well at the edge of the North Road was funded anonymously 2 winters past. "Somebody with deep pockets and no interest in credit for it," the man says, with the mild bafflement of someone who has never resolved the puzzle. He moves on to another subject. Nora does not. She rides back through the October afternoon with the map measurements running in her head and the provision storeman's words sitting beside them, and the drawing of the burning farmhouse and the silver buckle and the letters from Austin. Somebody with deep pockets and no interest in credit for it. She looks at the hills on the horizon. The same hills she has looked at every morning from the kitchen window of an unfinished house on what she now understands is the edge of something considerably larger than it appears. The wind comes off the flatlands cold and clean, carrying the smell of dry grass and distant rain that may or may not arrive. She does not have answers, but she has stopped pretending the questions aren't there, which is a different kind of beginning. The letter from Missouri arrives on a Tuesday in the first week of November, carried by the post rider, along with a hardware invoice and a notice from the county land office that Caleb reads and sets face down on the kitchen shelf without comment. Nora is at the table mending a work shirt when the post-rider hands her the stack at the door. She sorts through it with practiced efficiency, and then her hands stop. The envelope is not from her father. The handwriting is not his, cramped and slanted, the letters of a man who learned to write late and never fully trusted it. This script is precise and commercial, the hand of a man who writes for business purposes and has done it long enough that his letters have no personality left in them. The return address is a name she does not recognize, followed by a street in Harlow, Missouri. She opens it at the table while Caleb is still outside. The letter is 4 sentences. It identifies the writer as a man named Silas Orne, and it describes his professional relationship to her father in terms that leave no ambiguity. He is the creditor. The debt, he writes, was settled in full on the 14th of September, 1872, 3 weeks before she boarded the diligence in Harlow, settled by a third party in cash, whose name Mr. Orne was not at liberty to disclose per the terms of the transaction, but who had requested written confirmation of the settlement be forwarded to Nora Ellis Hurst at Caldwell Crossing, Texas, at this time. She reads it twice. Then she sets it flat on the table and looks at it the way she looks at problems, directly without flinching, with the particular attention of someone who needs to understand a thing completely before she decides what to do about it. The debt was cleared before she left, 3 weeks before she left, which means that when Odell Prentice sat across from her father at that kitchen table and laid out the arrangement, the debt that was supposedly the condition of the arrangement was already gone, already paid, by someone who then waited 3 weeks to see if she would agree to come anyway. She was not traded for a debt. The debt was used to open a door, and she walked through it on her own. The difference between those two things is vast, and she needs to sit with it before she decides what it means. She is still sitting with it when she hears Caleb's boots on the porch steps. He comes in, hangs his coat, goes to the basin. She waits until he has washed his hands and turned toward the stove before she speaks. "I received a letter," she says, "from a man named Silas Orne in Harlow." His hands do not stop. He pours his coffee. But the quality of his stillness changes, and she is fluent enough in him now to read it. "He says my father's debt was paid in full 3 weeks before I left Missouri," she says, "by an unnamed third party who asked for written confirmation to be sent to me." Caleb turns. He holds his coffee in both hands and looks at her across the kitchen with the expression he wears when he has decided to be honest and is choosing the precise form of it. "Yes," he says. One word, but it carries the full weight of what it confirms. "You paid it," she says, not a question. "Yes." She looks at him for a long moment. The kitchen holds its breath around them, the fire in the stove clicking quietly, the wind outside pressing against the new siding on the front addition. "Why?" she asks. He sets the cup down. He looks at the table surface between them, and she watches something move through his face. Not evasion, not calculation, but the particular difficulty of a man who has spent years keeping something private, suddenly standing at the edge of saying it out loud. "There's more to it," he says. "When the time is right, I'll tell you all of it." "The time," she says carefully, "may become relevant sooner than you think." He looks up at her. She holds his gaze and slides the county land office notice across the table toward him, the one he set face down and did not discuss. He picks it up, he reads it, and this time the stillness in his face is not control over feeling. It is the flat recognition of a man who has been watching a threat approach from the distance and has just confirmed it has arrived. She has already read it, of course. She read it while he was still outside. The notice is a formal query from the Caldwell Crossing county clerk, citing a challenge to the land registry records for the Hurst property, a challenge filed by a party whose name appears in the document as D. Cale, represented by the local notary office, Dwight Cale, the man whose question about the east parcel Caleb flatly refused on the day she arrived. The man she has been building a picture of for 2 months without yet having a complete frame. "Tell me about the letters from Austin," she says. This time he does. He speaks in the plain, sparse sentences of a man unaccustomed to being required to explain himself, but he does not withhold. His father, Thomas Hurst, acquired 4,200 acres along the Brazos River branch over 30 years, buying land quietly during periods when no one else was buying. He died in the spring of 1870, leaving a formal testament registered with the Law Office of Merritt and Cole in Austin, the only office his father trusted 40 years prior, because its founding partner had dealt with him fairly once when no one else would. The testament transferred ownership fully to Caleb, registered in Austin, never transferred to the Caldwell Crossing county records. It was not negligence. It was his father's particular stubbornness about the county clerk, a man Thomas Hurst had called crooked in 1858 and never revised his opinion of. The county clerk had since been replaced, but the registration had never been corrected, and the gap, the legal distance between the Austin record and the local record, was the crack that Cale had found and was now attempting to drive a wedge into. He doesn't know about Austin, Caleb says. He thinks the county record is the only record. But if he files a formal challenge, Nora says, and the county clerk processes it before Austin responds, it creates a window, he says, a short one. She is quiet for a moment. She looks at the county notice on the table between them. I want to write to the Austin office, she says, directly, as your wife and co-party to the property. He looks at her. A letter from you carries different weight than another letter from your attorneys, she says. It establishes active residence. It requests transfer of the registration to the county record before the challenge can be processed and, she pauses, measuring the next part carefully, if I include the date of Cale's notice, the office will understand the urgency. You'd be putting your name into a legal dispute, he says. My name is already in it, she replies. It has been since the day at the courthouse. He looks at her for a long time. Outside, the November wind has found the gap under the front door and moves through the kitchen floor like cold water. All right, he says. She writes the letter that afternoon at the kitchen table, in the clear and deliberate hand she developed keeping her father's farm accounts when she was 16 years old. She addresses it to Merritt and Cole, attorneys at law, Austin, Texas. She identifies herself as Nora Ellis Hurst, wife of Caleb Hurst, current resident of the Hurst property at Caldwell Crossing. She requests urgent confirmation and transfer of the registered testament to the county records office, citing the challenge notice and its date. She asks specifically that a representative of the office attend in person if the transfer requires witnessed documentation. She includes the date of the planned county hearing, which she found at the bottom of the notice in small print, the 14th of January, 1873. Caleb reads the letter without changing its substance. He adds one line at the bottom in his own hand, authorizing Nora's correspondence as acting on his full behalf. He folds it, seals it, and rides to the post office himself that afternoon to ensure it goes out on the evening rider. Nora watches him ride out from the kitchen window, and then stands very still for a moment. She had a plan when she arrived, a deadline, a departure. The shape of that plan is now so altered that she can barely find the original outline of it, and she is honest enough with herself, in the quiet of an empty kitchen in November in Texas, 700 miles from Missouri, to acknowledge that the alteration did not begin with the letter from Silas Orne. It began earlier than that. She is not yet sure how much earlier. 3 days later, she finds out about Martha. It comes through a dismissed ranch hand named Cole Ferris, a young man who worked 2 weeks on the property in September, before Cale's operation absorbed the seasonal labor pool and left Caleb short-staffed. Ferris appears at the ranch gate on a Thursday morning, looking for half a day's work and whatever Caleb can spare. He is 17, poorly fed, and carries a folded note in his shirt pocket that falls onto the ground when he reaches for his hat. Nora is closer than he is. She picks it up before he can. He freezes. The look on his face tells her everything before she opens it. She opens it anyway. The handwriting is familiar. She spent 2 months reading it on the covers of dry goods packages and in the careful, friendly notes that Martha Greer pressed into her hand at the mercantile and at the post office, always with the warmth of a woman who had decided to take the new arrival under her protective concern. She knows this handwriting. The note is addressed to Cale. It is brief and informative. It details the trip to the county land office that Nora and Caleb made the previous week. It mentions the letter to Austin. It names the law office. It ends with a line that reads, "She is more involved in it than he lets on. Harder to remove than expected." Nora reads it twice. Then she folds it along its original crease, and places it in her apron pocket with the flat, quiet precision of someone filing a document. She pays Cole Ferris for a morning's work on the fence line. She says nothing to him about the note, because he is 17 years old and was used without fully understanding what he was carrying, and she has no interest in punishing people below the level of the actual decision. She does not go to Martha. She does not send word. She does not acknowledge in any public or private setting that anything has changed. The next time she passes Martha Greer on the street in Caldwell Crossing, she nods once, politely, briefly, with the same expression she would give a post she was walking past, and continues on without slowing her step. Martha's expression, in the half-second before Nora looks away, says that the message was received completely. That evening, Nora writes a second letter. This one goes to Harlow, Missouri. It is addressed to her father. It is not long, and it is not warm. It tells him that the debt has been settled, that she is aware of the terms under which it was settled, and that she is not returning to Missouri. It tells him that she does not require anything from him and does not intend to offer anything further in either direction. It tells him that she hopes he is well because she is not a cruel woman and she cannot pretend otherwise. She signs it with her full name, Nora Ellis Hurst. She seals it and sets it on the windowsill for the morning post rider and goes to bed in the November dark with the sound of wind in the mesquite and the fire burning low in the kitchen stove. The plan she arrived with is gone. What is in its place is not yet fully named, but it is hers, and she built it herself, and that is more than she came with. The official from Austin arrives on a Wednesday, 2 days before the auction. His name is Edmund Farr, and he rides into Caldwell Crossing on a grey gelding with a leather satchel strapped across his back and the particular bearing of a man who has travelled too many Texas roads to be impressed by any of them. He is perhaps 50, lean and precise, with wire spectacles and a coat that speaks of the city without being ostentatious about it. He goes directly to the county clerk's office, presents his credentials, and requests a private meeting with the sitting clerk, not the compromised one, who resigned quietly 2 weeks after Nora's letter arrived in Austin, and whose absence from the office is the first sign that her correspondence had more reach than she anticipated. Nora learns all of this from the mercantile owner, who tells her without being asked because Caldwell Crossing is the kind of town where the arrival of a man with a government satchel is discussed before his horse is unsaddled. She thanks him, buys her flour, and rides back to the ranch with the information arranged into a clear picture. Her letter worked, not as a last hope, but as a precise instrument filed with the right information at the right time. Edmund Farr is not here by accident. He is here because she told Austin when to be here and why. She does not tell Caleb this interpretation of events. She tells him the facts. Farr has arrived. He is meeting with the county clerk, and the hearing is in 2 days. Caleb listens, nods once, and goes back to the harness he is mending. But his jaw has the particular set of a man who has done his own accounting and arrived at the same number she has. The town knows something is happening. The rumor about the land challenge has been circulating at the edges of conversation for weeks, fed carefully by Cale's network, and the arrival of a man from the state capital confirms for everyone that the stakes are real. Caldwell Crossing is too small to have more than one story at a time. For the next 2 days it has this one. Dwight Cale is visible throughout. He moves through town with the confidence of a man who has prepared for a particular outcome and sees no reason to doubt it. He eats his meals at the saloon with the local men who are aligned with his commercial interests, speaks in the cordial, measured tones of someone who considers the matter largely settled, and directs a thin smile at Caleb the one time their paths cross on the main street. Caleb does not return it. He does not break stride. Nora observes Cale from a distance and notes the confidence. She notes it the way she noted the dam on the river branch, as information rather than threat. A man that's certain has not planned for the specific shape of what is coming. The night before the hearing, she sits at the kitchen table and lays out, in her own hand, a clean summary of the sequence of events since August. The water diversion, the rumors about the marriage, the county notice, the notary, the dismissed clerk. She is not certain she will need it, but she has never trusted certainty, and prepared is a posture she knows how to hold. Caleb comes in from the barn late and finds her still at the table. He looks at what she is writing. He does not ask. He pours 2 cups of coffee and sets one in front of her without being invited to sit, and then sits anyway. They work in the same silence they have been building for 4 months, and it is a different silence now from the one that met her when she stepped off the diligence. Less absence, more substance. Farr will have the documents, he says after a while. Yes, she says, and I gave him the date in the letter, so he planned for this. He looks at her over his cup. Something in his expression is not quite the stillness she is accustomed to reading there. It is something adjacent to it. Steadiness, with a different quality underneath. You gave him the date, he says. It was in the county notice, she says. It made sense to include it. He is quiet for a moment. It did, he says. That is all. But the way he says it carries more than the words account for. The 14th of January comes in cold and iron grey, the sky low and pressed flat against the hills, with the particular quality of a winter morning that has decided not to offer anything ornamental. The main street of Caldwell Crossing is more populated than usual by 9 o'clock. Men gathered in clusters outside the land office and the saloon, women at the edges of boardwalks, the blacksmith standing at the open door of his shop with his arms folded and his attention directed toward the land office steps. Tom Briggs is there, near the back of the crowd, with the look of a man who would prefer to be somewhere else entirely and has not yet found a sufficiently dignified way to leave. Nora and Caleb arrive together on horseback and tie their horses at the post outside the land office. They walk in side by side. The room inside is already full, Cale at the front near the adjudicator's table, flanked by the local notary, whose name Nora now knows is Amos Webb. A narrow-faced man who has cultivated an expression of mild professionalism that does not survive close scrutiny. Edmund Farr sits to the right, his satchel open on the table beside him, papers stacked and ordered. The new county clerk, a younger man named Briggs, no relation to Tom, presides from the head of the table. Cale sees Nora and Caleb enter, and the confidence in his bearing does not visibly diminish. He has not planned for contingency. That is his primary weakness, and she recognized it weeks ago. The proceeding opens with the clerk reading the formal challenge, a dispute of title to the land, registered under the name of Thomas Hurst, deceased, and currently occupied and claimed by Caleb Hurst. The basis of the challenge, absence of local registration following the death of the original title holder, creating an unresolved succession that, per the challenger's filing, renders the property legally unassigned. Cale speaks first, which is his right as the filing party. He speaks well, the measured, reasonable cadence of a man who has delivered versions of this argument before. He is not accusatory. He speaks of the public good, of proper documentation, of the county's interest in clear title records. He does not once look at Nora. Then Edmund Farr opens his satchel. The testament is registered in Austin on the 3rd of April, 1870. It bears the seal of the General Land Office and the witnessed signatures of 2 Austin attorneys. It names Caleb Hurst as sole beneficiary of the full Hurst land holding, described by precise cadastral coordinates that correspond exactly to the map Nora found in the cellar. Farr lays it on the table with the quiet authority of a man placing the final piece of a document set that was always complete and was only waiting to be presented. He then lays beside it the transfer registration, completed at the county clerk's office in Austin, 48 hours after receiving Nora's letter, backdated by legal right to the date of the original testament. The title has been formally transferred to the Caldwell Crossing County record. It is no longer a gap waiting to be exploited. It is a closed door. The room is quiet in the way rooms go quiet when the air changes. Cale's expression does not break immediately. He has the discipline of a man who has been in difficult rooms before. He looks at the documents and then at Farr and then at the county clerk, and his voice, when it comes, is a register cooler than before. The validity of the marriage claim should also be entered into the record, he says. If the wife's legal standing is questionable, her correspondence to Austin may be equally so. He still does not look at Nora directly. He addresses the clerk, the room, the assembled witnesses, the entire space except for the woman he is attempting to remove from it. It is the moment she has been waiting for, without knowing precisely what form it would take. She stands. In 1873, in a Texas county land proceeding, women do not typically address the room. They are present as appendages of the men whose names appear on documents. This is known, accepted, unremarked upon. Nora knows it as well as anyone in the room. She stands anyway and she waits, and the particular quality of her stillness, the straight spine, the level gaze, the absolute absence of apology, creates a silence that the clerk does not immediately fill. The record, she says, should reflect that the marriage of Nora Ellis and Caleb Hurst was registered at this county courthouse on August the 9th, 1872, witnessed by Justice Aldred and Court Clerk Davies, both of whom are present in this town. She pauses. The record should also reflect that the rumor of a prior commitment was introduced into this community in October of last year, through a specific intermediary, with the clear intention of creating legal uncertainty about a marriage that has never been in any doubt. Cale's gaze finally moves to her. It is not the gaze of a man who has found what he expected there. "I have no prior commitment," she says. "I came from Harlow, Missouri. I have letters. I have the post record of my departure. And I have the patience to produce every piece of documentation required, for as long as it takes." In any proceeding Cale chooses to initiate. She lets that land. "I would suggest his time and the court's time are both better spent elsewhere." The clerk clears his throat and makes a note. It is in this moment, the moment where the air in the room has shifted, and Cale is recalculating and Farr is writing something in the margin of his document, and the crowd along the walls is very still, that Caleb speaks. He does not stand. He has been seated at the table the entire proceeding, composed and quiet in the manner that Caldwell Crossing has always read as indifference and has always misread entirely. He reaches into his coat and produces a document that is not the testament, not the transfer registration, not any paper that has been referenced in the preceding discussion. He sets it on the table in front of the clerk. "A co-title registration," he says. "Filed jointly at the Austin office on the same day as the transfer, Nora Ellis Hurst, named as co-holder of the Hurst land, holding in full, effective the date of our marriage." He says it without drama, without looking around the room to measure its reception, without any of the performance that the moment might seem to invite. He says it the way he says most things, as a fact that was decided before he spoke it, offered now only because the moment requires it to be spoken aloud. Nora looks at the document on the table. She looks at the date in the upper left corner. 2 days after she rode to the Austin office with him, 2 days after she sat across from him and told him she wanted to write the letter. He did not tell her. He went back to the courthouse while she was organizing the supply room and filed the second document without announcement, without ceremony, the way he mends a fence or hangs a lantern or turns the soil in a kitchen garden before dawn. The room takes a moment to process it. Then 2 moments. Cale looks at the co-title registration with the expression of a man who has walked with confidence to the edge of a table and found himself looking at the floor. The challenge, all of it, the rumors, the notary, the county filing, the months of careful positioning, has been built on the assumption that the woman in this arrangement was a weakness, a provisional element, a point of entry. She is instead a co-holder of 4,200 acres of Texas land, with a registration date predating his challenge by weeks. He reaches for his hat. He does not speak again. Edmund Farr looks at Nora across the table with the mild appreciation of a man who has seen a great many proceedings and can recognize when one has been decided before it formally opened. Tom Briggs, from his position near the back wall, raises his hand with the reluctant urgency of a man who has waited as long as he can afford to. "I need to speak to the record," he says. His voice has the quality of a man confessing rather than testifying, and the room turns toward him with collective attention. He looks at the floor. He describes in halting and over-specific sentences the arrangement Cale made with him in August, the cancelled debt, the requested water diversion, the instructions to say nothing. He does not look at Cale while he speaks. He does not look at Nora either. He looks at the floor and he says what he knows, and the thing he knows is sufficient. The county clerk is still writing when Cale pushes through the door into the grey January morning. He does not run. He walks, which is worse. The walk of a man who still has enough pride to perform composure, on his way to a defeat he hasn't finished calculating yet. Nora watches him go through the land office window. Then she looks at the co-title registration on the table. Then she looks at Caleb. He is already looking at her. Outside, Caldwell Crossing exhales, the particular release of a town that has been holding a collective breath and has just remembered how to let it go. Voices begin, then swell, filling the street with the particular noise of people who have witnessed something and cannot wait to begin the work of describing it. Inside the land office, for one moment, it is still. The consequences arrive in the days after the hearing, the way consequences tend to arrive, not all at once, but in a steady, unhurried progression that has the quality of inevitability rather than surprise. Amos Webb, the notary, is the first. The county clerk files a formal complaint with the district court the morning after the hearing, citing Webb's involvement in the preparation of fraudulent challenge documents. Webb closes his office on Thursday. By Friday, the sign above the door is gone. He is seen leaving Caldwell Crossing on Saturday morning with a loaded wagon, and the expression of a man who has decided that a new town is preferable to the specific variety of ruin that awaits him in this one. Nobody stops him. Nobody waves him off. He simply goes, and the gap he leaves on the north side of the main street is filled within a week by the natural indifference of a town that has already moved on to other business. Cale's process is slower and more deliberate. The fraud charge against him is filed by Edmund Farr on behalf of the Austin office before Farr rides back south, and it lands in the district court with the full weight of a state-level land office complaint behind it. Cale does not flee. He has connections in Austin, old ones carefully maintained, and he uses them, and the result is that the case moves at the unhurried pace that cases move when money is applying pressure to the mechanisms of delay. He remains in Caldwell Crossing through February, reduced in standing, stripped of the easy authority he wore like a second coat, but present, still watching. Nora is aware of him the way she is aware of weather. She does not ignore it. She does not let it dictate her movements. She goes to town when she has business in town. She conducts that business with the same directness she has always brought to it, and she does not adjust her route or her schedule to avoid the possibility of encountering a diminished man who has not yet finished being diminished. He leaves in March. No announcement, no forwarding address, no final scene. He is simply there on a Tuesday and gone by Thursday, and the only evidence of his departure is the dark square on the wall of the saloon where his credit notice hung for 11 years. Dwight Cale, the notice once read, is known here. The wall beneath the square is a lighter shade, protected from the years of tobacco smoke and lamp soot. He is gone, but Nora does not close the accounting on him. A man who operates the way he operated does not stop because one contest failed. He goes somewhere else and finds a new angle. She knows this the way she knows weather, and she keeps knowing it quietly without sharing the knowledge with anyone who would tell her she worries too much. Tom Briggs is a simpler resolution. Without Cale's financial backing, his debts reappear with the full weight that had been temporarily lifted from them. He sells the adjacent property in March, a quiet transaction handled through the county clerk, and is gone from the valley before the spring thaw has finished with the ground. Nora does not mark his departure with anything beyond a single note in the household ledger indicating the change of ownership of the neighboring parcel. Practical, recorded, closed. Martha Greer remains in Caldwell Crossing, which Nora had expected. Martha Greer's voice carries less weight now in Caldwell Crossing, her place adjusted quietly by the same town that once amplified it. Women in small towns do not easily leave the places they have built their social standing in, even when that standing has been damaged. Martha is not the same fixture she was before January. The town knows enough to have recalibrated her position, and that recalibration carries its own quiet justice. Nora does not attend to it. She made her decision about Martha in November, in a single moment of deliberate inattention on the main street, and she has not revised it. The distance between them is permanent and publicly understood and requires no maintenance. What requires maintenance is everything else: the ranch, the land, the household, the slow and daily work of building a life from the materials available. The winter eases by degrees through February and into March, and the work expands to fill the warming days. The east plot is prepared for spring planting. The front addition, framed in raw timber since August, finally receives its siding, the work done by Caleb and 2 hired hands over 3 days of dry weather. The porch railing is repaired, the kitchen garden is extended along the full south wall, the new beds dug and turned and waiting. Nora takes over the ranch ledger fully in February, with Caleb's knowledge and without formal discussion. She finds it in better order than she expected. He is not a careless man. But she improves it, introducing a forward accounting system that tracks expected costs against projected yield for each season. He reads her first quarterly summary without comment, and then, the following week, begins leaving the incoming invoices sorted by date on the corner of the desk rather than in the kitchen shelf stack. It is the administrative equivalent of the lantern outside her door. She receipts the invoices without comment. The system works. In the first week of March, a letter arrives from Missouri. She opens it at the table before Caleb comes in. Her father's handwriting is unsteady, the same tremor she last saw in his hands at that kitchen table in Harlow, now transmitted through the pen onto paper. He has received her letter. He does not dispute the terms she set. He does not ask for anything. He writes in 3 short paragraphs of the careful language of a man who knows he is not owed a reply, that he understood she would not return, that he thought she should know her younger brother Samuel is well and working at the mill in Harlow, that he hopes the Texas land is good. She reads it twice. She sets it in the ledger between 2 entries, not in the cedar box where she keeps the letters she intends to keep, not in the stove. In the ledger, filed, neither dismissed nor enshrined. She thinks about Samuel, 12 years old when she left, quick and serious and too young to have been consulted about any of it. She writes him a letter separately that same evening, not to her father's address, to the mill in Harlow, care of the foreman, addressed to Samuel Ellis directly. She tells him she is well. She tells him the Texas land is larger than expected. She tells him that if he ever wants to see it, the road exists and the door is open. She seals it and sets it with the Morning Post without telling anyone. Some things are hers to begin without committee. The evening that tips something between them is not a large evening. It is not preceded by drama or crisis or the kind of external pressure that has been the engine of every significant moment since August. It is a Tuesday in the 2nd week of March, ordinary in all its aspects. Supper cleared, the fire burning steady, the sound of the wind in the new siding finding a register lower and quieter than the drafts through the framing ever allowed. Caleb is at the desk, going over a land survey for the northeast parcel. Nora is at the table with the quarterly ledger. The lamp between them is well trimmed and steady. There is nothing demanding their attention, except what is in front of them, and for the first time since she arrived, the absence of crisis does not feel like the pause before the next crisis. It feels like something else. She sets down her pen. "The debt," she says, "in Missouri. You paid it before Prentice came to my father." He looks up from the survey. "I want to know why," she says. "All of it." He sets the survey down. He turns his chair slightly toward her, and she recognizes this as the posture of a man preparing to speak at length, which for him means more than 4 sentences. He begins with Missouri, 1864. The 52nd Texas Infantry, a unit that had no business being that far north and wasn't supposed to be there for long. A reconnaissance detail crossing a valley outside Harlow in the 2nd week of September. Their farmhouse burning on the far side of a ridge, not a military burning, a domestic one, set by men who were ahead of them and already gone. He rode toward it because there was a sound coming from inside the tree line. A girl of 16, sitting with her back against an oak, with her arms wrapped around a boy of about 4, rocking him slowly while the farmhouse collapsed inward. The boy was asleep, which was remarkable under the circumstances, and she was keeping him that way by force of will alone, singing something low and continuous under her breath that was barely a song, just a sound, just the shape of calm maintained for someone smaller who needed it. Caleb's voice, as he tells this, has the flat precision of a man reporting facts, but she is fluent enough in him now to hear what sits underneath the flat precision. The lines of the drawing in the Bible return to her then, the collapsed roof and the figures moving away no longer abstract. He helped them to the nearest neighboring farm, half a mile east. He stayed until the neighbors confirmed they would be taken in. He rode back to his detail before dawn. He did not learn the family name. He did not learn her name. There was no time, and he told himself that was the reason he didn't ask, and for a long time he believed it. He comes back to the present on his own without being prompted. He left the army in 1865 and came back to the Caldwell Crossing land his father had been building for 30 years. He thought about the girl occasionally, the way a man thinks about something he witnessed that impressed him and that he cannot account for in ordinary terms. Not obsession, not pining. A specific and persistent memory of a specific kind of strength, held in the mind the way certain landscapes hold in the mind for no apparent reason. 8 years passed. In the fall of 1871, a land agent traveling through Caldwell Crossing mentioned a valley in Missouri where families were still rebuilding, where a name, Ellis, had come up in connection with a parcel that had been rebuilt and was now being lost again to debt. It was a common name. He had no reason to think it was the same family. He wrote to the land agent anyway, asking for a description of the property. The response included a detail about the Ellis family, a daughter, 23, who had been running the farm account since she was 16 after her mother passed. Since she was 16 the same year, he hired a private inquiry in Harlow. The inquiry returned a description that matched. He sat with the information for 3 months before he did anything with it, because doing something with it required an honesty about his own intentions that took him time to arrive at. He was not in the habit of rushing. He paid the debt in September 1872. He asked Odell Prentice to present the arrangement as a consequence of the debt rather than independent of it, because he understood that a woman with Nora's instincts presented with the arrangement in its true form. A man she had never met, who had found her through inquiry, who wanted her to come to Texas, one would have refused before Prentice finished his sentence. The framing was not deception, he says. It was the only door she would have opened. And if I had said no, she says, Prentice had instructions to accept it without argument, he says. The debt would have stayed paid. I would not have appeared in Missouri or written to you or sent anyone else. She is quiet for a moment. That was a considerable risk, she says. Yes, he says. You spent 8 years on the memory of an hour, she says. He looks at her steadily. I spent 8 years on what I saw in that hour, he says. There is a difference. The fire clicks in the stove. Outside, the March wind runs along the south wall and finds the kitchen garden, and she can hear it moving through the new growth, a sound she's been listening for since February, the particular sound of something that was bare earth becoming something else. She does not have an answer for him, not one that language handles cleanly. She looks at the lamp between them, and at the ledger and at the survey folded on the desk, and at the man sitting with his hands still and his eyes quiet, and his entire posture arranged around the patience of someone who waited 8 years without declaration and can certainly wait through a silence. She stands. She crosses to the door that opens onto the porch. She lifts one of the chairs, the one that has always been hers, set at its habitual distance from his, and she carries it outside. She sets it directly beside the second chair, not across the porch, not at the angle of convenient proximity. Beside it, she sits down. After a moment, she hears the door open behind her. He comes out without a coat, the way a man comes out who is not planning to stay long and then stays anyway. He sits. The March dark is clear and immense above the valley, the stars hard and bright in the way they only are when the air has been scoured clean by cold. The hills to the east are a dark suggestion against a darker sky. The land stretches out in every direction, 4,000 acres of it with both their names on the title, patient and enormous and entirely indifferent to the two people sitting at the edge of it, trying to find the language for what they have built. They do not find it that night. Some things resist being named before they are ready, but neither of them goes back inside for a long time. It is 11 days later that the stranger arrives. Nora sees him from the kitchen window on a Thursday morning, a figure on the road from Caldwell Crossing, well mounted on a black horse, dressed in the manner of a man who has traveled far and taken care about it. Not a ranch hand, not a local. The cut of the coat is different from anything she has seen in Caldwell Crossing, the posture in the saddle too deliberate. She watches him turn at the gate. Caleb is at the fence line on the south field, a quarter-mile out. She goes to the porch as the stranger rides into the yard and stops. He is perhaps 40, square-jawed, with pale eyes that take in the house and the barn, and Nora, with the same practiced efficiency. He removes his hat. "Mum," he says, "I'm looking for C.H. Hurst, out of Caldwell Crossing. Not Caleb Hurst, not the rancher. C.H. Hurst, and out of, not from." The phrasing is specific. "On what matter?" she says. Not a question exactly, an assessment. He reaches into his coat and produces a small card. She crosses the yard and takes it. The card has no printed name, only an address in Wichita, Kansas, and below it, in handwritten ink, 4 words: "He will know me." She looks up at the man. His pale eyes are steady and patient and carry something in them she cannot fully read. Not threat, not friendliness, something more complicated than either. She hears boots behind her. Caleb has seen the horse from the field and come in. She turns to hand him the card. She watches his face as he reads it. He goes very still. Not the controlled stillness she knows from county hearings and difficult conversations. A different quality, the stillness of a man confronted with something he believed had been left far enough behind to stay there, and has just discovered it hasn't. The stranger on the horse waits without speaking. The morning air is cold and clean, and carries the smell of spring earth beginning to wake, and somewhere along the south fence the new growth Nora planted is already 3 inches out of the ground, patient and green, and entirely unaware that the ground beneath it has just shifted in a way that hasn't finished settling. Caleb looks up from the card. He looks at Nora. She looks back at him with the steady, clear attention of a woman who has read weather all her life and knows a front when she sees one moving in. Whatever is coming, it is coming for both of them.